Jack was an accountant at one of the companies based in San Francisco, owned by the renowned businessman Thomas. Jack had been entrusted with overseeing all matters related to the company's accounts due to the trust he had gained through his seriousness and diligent work for nearly 30 years. Thomas wanted to hand over the company to his son, William, who was 28 years old, his only child. However, William had been raised in an overly indulgent manner, which extended his childhood years far beyond the natural age of childhood. His personality remained childish. Thomas believed that his son was not ready and that his years had passed too quickly. He thought that William might not live longer than what had already passed. William did not see things from the same perspective. He was immersed in debauchery, parties, and hot nights, surrounded by young people who pretended to be his friends but had their eyes on his wealth. William got what he wanted, and when things became difficult, he would turn to his mother for her kindness and affection. Thomas decided to take action to save what could be saved. He believed that enabling William to have access to money without any restrictions was what led him down the path of debauchery and indulgence. Therefore, he saw that the first thing to do was to regulate what the young man received as an allowance. Thomas was not a stingy man, so he set a reasonable monthly allowance for his son. It was enough to cover the necessities, but not the luxuries or the company of those young people who always surrounded him. Thomas was convinced that cutting off the sources of money would have a positive impact on his son's behavior. After a few weeks, the effects of this plan started to show. Those who claimed to be William's friends drifted away, and the women who used to gather around him no longer did so. Despite not losing everything, William began to feel the financial constraints imposed by his father. He longed for the company of his friends, especially the blondes and those with dark eyes, but he knew that he wouldn't have them without money. William didn't learn his lesson. He knocked on every door, including his mother's, who had always given him what he wanted. But this time, he found all the doors closed. He had a desire to respond to those who had left him by regaining their attention with money. He was confident that those greedy people would return once the smell of money was on his hands. He asked himself how to access his father's funds. Jack, the head accountant, had a daughter in her early 20s who had recently joined a college. He had built trust with her and made her believe in what he told her. He told her that he had never been in a relationship with any of the young men. He confessed his love for her and promised to marry her. In reality, the girl, Sophie, played an important role in the plan William was preparing. He knew that Sophie's father had the authority to withdraw any amount from the company's accounts, so he thought of using Sophie as leverage to extort money from her father. On the day when William decided to execute his plan, he asked Sophie to accompany him to his private apartment in San Francisco, claiming that he wanted to show her the apartment they would live in after their marriage and discuss how to furnish it. In the apartment, he reiterated his deep love for her, making her his accomplice in the plan. He told her that setting up the apartment required a significant amount of money and that his father had trapped him financially. He suggested that she play the role of a hostage until he could get a ransom from his father, after which they would enjoy what they had acquired together. Sophie agreed to play the role of the hostage, and William recorded her voice as she pleaded with her father to save her from the clutches of the gang holding her. He then transferred the recording to a CD, making sure not to leave any fingerprints, and sent it to the company's management, addressed to Mr. Jack, who was away at the college. Jack received the CD and, after some hesitation, played it on his personal computer. He heard Sophie introducing herself as his daughter and claiming to be held hostage by a ruthless gang willing to do anything. Then, Sophie's voice begged him to meet the gang's demands. Jack was shocked, and his heart almost stopped. Then his office phone rang. On the other end, a man's voice told him that Sophie was still safe for now, but if he wanted her to return safely, he needed to pay a $20,000 ransom, The man warned him that any contact with the police would not be in his or his daughter's interest, and mentioned that someone from the gang was keeping an eye on him. Then the call was abruptly disconnected. Jack's mind was racing in all directions, and he slumped in his chair. Then his phone rang again. On the other end, the voice of a man informed him that Sophie was still okay, but he needed to pay the ransom soon. Jack's mind was racing in all directions, and he slumped in his chair. He later informed Thomas, the owner of the company, about the situation. Jack had regained consciousness and struggled to hide his emotions. When Thomas asked him what was troubling him, he hesitated for a moment, then said that he needed a loan of $20,000 from the company. Thomas promised to look into the matter and returned to the company's headquarters. He asked one of the accountants to perform a quick audit, suspecting the possibility of embezzlement. However, the audit revealed that the accounts were in order. Jack returned to work, expecting a new call from the kidnappers. Meanwhile, Thomas signed the check for the loan. He handed it to Jack. After some time, Jack received another call from the kidnappers, and he tried to extend the duration of the conversation while tracking the identity of the caller. The call was traced back to an address that was the same as the president's residence. Thomas had a daughter, Sophie, who had recently joined college and had been having a romantic relationship with Jack. The police decided to monitor the situation closely and authorized wiretaps on Jack's phone to trace the calls. A young female officer was assigned to the case. Jack was asked to do his best to prolong the phone call with the kidnappers when they called him, and the identity of the caller was determined. The address matched the location of the president's apartment. It was decided that the apartment would be raided and everything inside would be closely monitored. Those who observed the apartment noted that the hostage moved freely inside, and when the apartment was eventually raided, only William was found inside. Sophie confessed later that she had not expected the situation to escalate to this point. As for William, he spent a month in jail, and his father did not intervene to get him out. His imprisonment was seen as a continuation of the lesson he needed to learn.